Welcome to Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. This is Season 2, Episode 2. It is recorded on January 19th, 2026. It is released on January 20th, 2026. January 20th, of course, is the 1-year anniversary of the swearing in of Donald J. Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. And all of our worst inclinations about what would happen, well, they've come true, and in many instances, much worse. But let me be very clear before I get into the rest of this episode. What is happening in America? An aging old man would rather be a despised dictator than a failed president, as this president has started to realize that his power cannot solve the economic troubles of the American people, or create a safer space for the American people, or create innovation, or jobs, or really anything of substance. And as the American people realize increasingly that the promises given to them about re-electing, the rising from the phoenix, if you will, of this president, that he's not concerned about grocery prices or about safety or about the border or about making anything great again. And as more Americans understand this, well, this is a man who is not concerned about you, but about how he is remembered, especially in his old age and his increasing cognitive decline. And so, as he realizes with his declining cognitive ability that he is failing as a president, well, he has made the choice. He would rather be remembered as a dictator that you despise than as a president that failed. And we must do everything to protect, preserve, and improve our democracy. And I would think by now that if you're listening to Ignite, you have a similar view of the hope of representative democracy. And perhaps you've experienced a version of this country or your own childhood where you believed that the advancement of rights was possible, or maybe you saw it happen. Well, even in these dark times, I believe that, and I'm willing to fight for it. But it has unquestionably become a very scary thing to do. Indeed, we are rapidly approaching a time when it is dangerous to speak against this government, increasingly. But something occurred to me, especially after watching the death of Renee Nicole Good, January 7th, 2026. The cost of our fear is enormous, but the cost of our inaction is much worse. I said something today in a different format that I really truly believe. I am increasingly less concerned about what will happen if this government comes after me for speaking out against it than I am about what will happen if I say nothing at all. And I know that millions of Americans believe this very same thing. I don't know how long this episode will last, if America descends into some version of civil disarray or civil war or chaos. If you are wondering to yourself listening to this, am I crazy for thinking that we are on the edge, teetering on the edge of civil unrest or civil war or something much worse? You are not wrong. That is the reality. That is the possibility. And we must fight to protect it. As much as it is easy to be disdainful of the American political system, as much as it is easy to say nothing ever changes, no person or elected official is ever going to make this any better, we are facing the inevitable truth with literal blood on American streets. We have to choose to do something. This season of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise, will be much more direct and action-focused and specific action items. If you do not feel that you have that in you, or you are too afraid to stand up against this tyrannical government, it's okay. There is no judgment. You can go ahead and find a different podcast, perhaps something more humorous, to lighten your days in these very dark times. But if you feel an overwhelming moral weight to do something, then you are in the right place, and we must continue this work. But let me be very clear. I think that humor is essential in this time, these very dark times of ours, to lighten the mood, to be a form of resistance. Mocking, joking, sarcasm are all powerful tools in this age. But I want to teach you something as well. So on the subject of humor and jokes, I wanted to first tell you about whisper jokes. And I hope I'm getting this pronunciation correctly, but in Germany, the term would be Flusterwitze. Whisper jokes were jokes told in Germany that could not be told publicly in Nazi Germany because of the fear of persecution, or specifically the fear of execution because they criticized the Nazi regime. Whisper jokes spread in Nazi Germany specifically as a way to bring light to the situation and to identify fellow resistance members. They could be seen as a form of resistance. Here are a couple of examples of whisper jokes. Here we go. Hitler is visiting an asylum. The patients lined up by their beds to greet him with Heil Hitler. One man stands aside and does not greet him. Hitler gets angry and asks him why. He answers, "I'm not crazy. I'm the head of the ward." 1944, a person was executed for telling this joke. Hitler and Hermann Göring are standing on the Berlin radio tower. Hitler tells Göring he wants to do something to cheer up the people of Berlin. "Why don't you just jump?" Göring suggests. He was executed for telling that joke. This highlights both the importance of identifying and staying true to resistance and the danger of doing it in this time and in that time. But it also highlights the importance of having a sense of joy as a human being. There is, after all, no point in resistance if not for something. And I suspect that you are resisting, like me, because you believe in giving something better to your friends, family, or to your children. So let us remember the whisper joke, the humor of finding satire or the absurdity of this tyrannical regime. In that spirit, let me whisper to you a few jokes about this current time. On the subject of our president, a whisper joke. He loves law and order the way toddlers love bedtime, only when someone else has to do it. Another one. If confidence were a credential, he'd be a constitutional scholar. If reading were, well, I like that one. Here's another one. He treats checks and balances like it's a banking app that keeps declining his card. One last one. He calls everything a hoax, like the closed door button on an elevator, comforting but not connected to reality. That's a good one. You know, the closed door button on the elevator doesn't really do anything. Whisper jokes are an example of how human beings found lighthearted connection and resistance in a time of great fear. We live in a time of great fear now, but we must find a way out of this. So let us continue. Episode 2. We can call it Episode 1A, How to Steal an Election, Part 2. In the first episode of Season 2, we talked about how to steal an election legally through suggestions like running for office or for finding a candidate that you can like and support. But obviously, you need some more tools. Today, we're talking about something even more accessible, even more powerful, and frankly, even more threatening to the establishment. Understanding and weaponizing the primary system. And when I say weaponizing, I mean it in the most democratic sense possible. Because here's what I'm saying. The primary system is already weaponized. It's just weaponized against you, against us, against really anyone who wants actual representation instead of corporate-funded moderates who think bipartisanship means rolling over for fascists. So let's talk about how to steal it back. Part 1, the vulnerability. Understanding congressional primaries. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know what a primary election is? Congressional primaries are where democracy goes to die. Not because they're rigged in this sort of conspiracy theory sense of the game, although trust me when I say that sometimes there's a lot of pressure put on them. They are rigged through apathy, confusion, and intentional complexity. And I'm asking you this question. Do you know who your congressperson is, number one? But if they are not the best congressperson for you, do you know how to replace them? Or do you assume that they will just stay on the ballot? Let me give you some numbers that might make you a little bit angry. In the 2022 midterm primaries, these are the elections that determine who even gets on the ballot for Congress. And maybe let me back up there a little bit. The person running for your Congress representative or your Senate, they have to go through a local party process called a primary. The primary is when, for example, 10 Democrats run to be the Democratic candidate versus the Republican candidate in the general election. The midterms in 2022, that is going to be the general election, deciding who gets to have the D next to their name. This happens in the primary election. It is more likely than not that you have not participated in a primary election. That is okay. I want to teach you this. The average turnout in 2022 for a primary election was 10 to 20% of registered voters. And in some places, it was single digits. These elections are who decides who is running for office. And registered voters, by the way, that's already a subset of voters. So we're talking about a tiny, tiny fraction of a fraction of people in your town who decides who gets to run. This is not an accident. The Democratic Party in particular is very good at not talking about primary elections. And the reason is they don't want you to know when the primary is because they want their preferred candidate to coast to victory. The people who do show up for primaries, by the way, they are older, whiter, and wealthier. They're the people who have the time, the knowledge, and the resources to navigate a deliberately confusing system, and a system, by the way, that is designed to serve their best interest. They're the wealthy MSNBC watcher. They're the people who are already party leadership, or the people closely tied to and who know party leadership. A couple of things. If I'm not being very clear, I really want to land the plane on a couple of things. Number one, there is no shame in not knowing this before. Number two, there is no shame in being too busy to have participated in this before. Number three, you have no choice now. You have to participate in this now. You have to get your hands in this work. So let me tell you what I might recommend and how we move ahead. If you can get yourself and enough of your friends and your family to vote in the congressional primaries, the election before the election, you can steal the Democratic Party from the Democrats, and you can put someone in place who can effectively resist fascism. Again, it's okay if you haven't done this before. It is not okay for you not to do it now. What makes it also crazy is that every state has a different process. They're literally all over the map. Every state sets its own date. They go from March to September. Some states have closed primaries where you have to be registered. Some have open primaries where you do not have to be registered with that particular primary or party, I should say. And the confusion there is not accidental. It is literal voter suppression. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go Google your state's name and then primary election date 2026. Specifically the term you're going to do. Okay. So I picked a city, Madison, Wisconsin. That is about 285,300 residents as of 2024. It is a Democratic leaning district. And let's find out when the primary election. So we're going to go to Google right now and we're going to go, when is the primary election for Congress in Madison, Wisconsin? All right, let's see what we find. And what we found out in Madison, Wisconsin. So if you're listening in Madison, Wisconsin, you're welcome. I already did this work for you. August 26th, not November 3rd or 4th or 5th, whenever the general election is. August 11th, 2026. In Madison, Wisconsin, the primary election for partisan candidates is August 11th. The general election for your congressperson, for example, is going to be November 3rd. So on August 11th, you get to decide the Democrat that runs against the Republican on November 3rd. I hope I'm doing a good enough job explaining this. You're welcome to, by the way, reach out to me if I'm not doing a good job. So step number 2 is you need to confirm your voter registration status. Do you have to be a Democrat to vote in the Democratic primary? If so, you need to confirm your status by Googling voter registration status. Find it, do it now, do it today. If you need to change your registration status prior to the primary, do it. Change your registration. And step 3, sign up for election reminders. By the way, most secretaries of state have a email or text program that will do this for you. And if not, put it in your calendar. And then obviously step 4 is finding out who's running. This is harder than it should be. So again, this is intentional. One way you can do this is you can find your Secretary of State's candidate filing page. You can look in local newspapers. Ballotpedia is a very good source, but it's not always perfect. You can look for local progressive organizations, or you can start searching on Twitter, Threads, TikTok, Instagram for your congressional candidate. And I guess this should say, going above and zooming out a little bit, you might also need to find out what is your congressional district. So let us look and see. What is the congressional district for Madison, Wisconsin? So let's go back. What is the congressional district for Madison, Wisconsin? I'm typing. In general, Madison, Wisconsin is Wisconsin's second congressional district. Wisconsin 02. Using my home state as Nevada, the Congress is broken up into NV01, NV02, NV03, NV04, with NV02 being the only Republican. So now you know which congressional district. Now you know when the primary election is. Now you know how to find the candidate. Once you find the candidate that aligns with your values, you have so much more power than you ever knew. Let's be honest, by the way. People don't know when those elections are. We talked about that. People don't know who's running, and people don't think it matters. That's the big one. People have been conditioned to think that politics is something that happens to you, not something you do. You've been told your vote, your one vote doesn't matter. But you know, to be honest, the system is partially rigged, but it's rigged in a way that can be unrigged if enough people wake up and participate. And here's the truth they don't want you to know, by the way. In a low turnout primary, a few hundred votes can swing an election. A few dozen dedicated people can make the actual difference. If you find 10 friends and those friends find 10 people to vote when they might not otherwise have voted in that primary, you could literally steal the election from the Democrat. In the last episode, we talked about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is exactly what happened during her congressional primary. But of course, there's reason number 4. People are tired. Burnout is a real thing. The constant barrage of terrible news is absolutely a real thing. But it's also the trigger point because you have a reason to convince them to participate. You don't have to knock on doors. You don't have to make phone calls. You don't have to donate money. You just have to register, research, vote, and tell other people. And how do you do that? Well, it's the second part of, how to steal an election. Voter guides. Now we get tactical. Now we get practical. We build the actual weapon that turns knowledge into power, and we're going to call it a voter guide. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a document that tells people who to vote for. You've probably seen them before, by the way. But here's what you need to know. You do not need to be a company or an organization or a PAC or a political group to do this. You can be a voter guide, and you don't need permission. You just need to do the research and share it. So we already talked about how to research these candidates, how to find your progressive challenger, how to find your liberationist challenger. Once you find them, once you verify their positions, once you understand they are in fact the candidate you want to vote for, once you learn their history, once you dive deep and you find out who they are affiliated with and what they are affiliated for, well, you can actually become your own powerful election machine. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to tell people what to do. It can be one page max, really. But if it has to be 2, it can be. If you live in a big place with lots of elections, sure, make it 2. What you're going to do is you're going to list the primary election day and the candidate you recommend. And you're going to talk about why you recommend them. So you're going to say, for example, in Wisconsin 02, I'm recommending this candidate because our current Democratic representative is failing to live up to the moment. Here's everything I learned about them. They are not taking corporate donations. They are for Medicare for all, whatever that has to be for you. Keep it factual and cite your sources if you can. Talk about why you chose that person. It should be preferably like a PDF or a JPEG file or an image file that they can share on social media. Maybe a text document that they can copy and paste. You can put it on Google Docs with public sharing. You can post it to social media, email it to people. You can text it in your group chats. I know this sounds like a lot, but if you make a 1-page voter guide and you live in Wisconsin on August, and this is the primary, and you start texting people in May, in June, in July, and on August 10th, well, they're much more likely to vote. Now, I do need to zoom out here because, of course, the lawyers would want me to do this. I want to make sure you know that the information I'm talking about with Madison, Wisconsin specifically, you should independently verify. This was based on a very fast research for the show tonight, and I can't actually speak to the factual nature of this because I haven't done a deep dive and I don't live in Madison, Wisconsin. But the point is, you trusted me, did you not? You trusted me that the primary election was on August 11th. And if I started telling you now and you lived in Madison, you could get prepared to participate in that election. And if you aligned with my values, well, guess what? I just did research that you don't have time to do because you are exhausted. And so maybe there's a mail in ballot. Maybe when you get that mail in ballot in the mail, or you are told how to get your mail in ballot, you don't have to take time off from your already busy schedule to go vote on August 11th, but you might vote via mail because your friend Dan told you to, and they told you to make sure you get it in the mail in time, and your vote gets counted, and then another vote gets counted, and then you convince other people, and all of a sudden we have stolen an election right from underneath the establishment that does not care about us. If you learn more, you can update it. If a candidate says something disqualifying or bad, or you have to change your mind, cool. That's why it's more important to do this now than it is to wait until it's too late. In fact, if you make a candidate recommendation in May and all of a sudden in late July something happens, you telling your friends about that and saying, wow, I learned something about this person and I can't recommend you voting for this person now, and instead I recommend you voting for this person, that will perhaps quadruple your credibility and will make it more likely that they will actually participate. And the second part of that I kind of alluded to earlier was in a lot of states in primaries, you can participate via mail-in voting, but a lot of people don't know that and they don't know how to do it. Well, what if you could forward or find that information and make that easier for them? What if you could do that for 10 people? Or if you were ambitious, if you could do that for 200 people? And what if only 10 of those people did it for 10 more of those people? Well, that's 300 people, and that is more than enough to steal an election in some areas. What does this do? Well, number one, it multiplies your impact. You're not just one person voting. You're lending your credibility and authority to tens or hundreds of people who might also do the same. But they might not do the same if you don't do the next part, which is to ask them, explain the despair of the situation and why it's important to act now. You've just saved your friends and your community hundreds of collective hours. And by the way, it also creates something called social proof. When people see someone doing something, they are more likely to participate and do that thing. If you vote in your primary and you show them who and how to vote, who to vote for and how to vote, they are much more likely to do that. We are, in fact, social creatures, but you are also building your own election infrastructure. Once you create one voter guide, you have a template for your voter guides. You have a process, and the next election, you do it faster. You get better at it. And the last thing, it absolutely terrorizes the establishment. I talk about the Democratic Party right now, but this could apply to any party. It really could. Independent, Republican, it's a template that you can apply. If you live in an area where it may not be possible for you to, for example, elect a Democrat to fight fascism, perhaps you could find a Republican with a backbone and make that impact instead. Now we put this all together. Let's get insurgent with this stealing an election. The establishment controls the Democratic Party through a simple formula: low information, low turnout, victory. They count on most people not knowing when those primaries are, not knowing who's running, not voting. This allows them to put their corporate candidate in place, they win the primary, and they go on and they coast into what in many instances is just an easy victory. The existing candidate in Madison, Wisconsin will probably win by default and will probably go on to win the Democratic nomination. But here's our new playbook. Number one, identify target races. Do this now. Not every race is winnable. Not every incumbent needs to be primaried. Focus your energy on where it matters. Number two, support the progressive challengers. Once you've identified your target races, the candidates who can fight fascism, whether that's in your district, and honestly, if it's not in your district and you can focus your efforts elsewhere, do that. And yes, by the way, financial support matters. If you find a small insurgent candidate running for mayor in your town, $10 here or $15 there actually does matter. Here, if you have not done so. Phone banking and text banking can be a bitch. It's not necessarily fun. But if you called 10 of your friends instead of 10 numbers from a random list, well, the impact would be much larger. You can ask them to do the same. People are craving for leadership at this time. And if you show up to the moment right now as a leader, your friends, family, and loved ones will respond. Here's the part, by the way, that the establishment that's protecting fascism really hates. this is not just a one-time thing. If we start implementing this and we have even just one win, well, we're starting to make a dent in the system. And by the way, the goal is not just to win one race, it's to create sustained pressure and to put people in office who actually serve our interest. Let's talk about what getting involved early actually means. Okay? So right now, January 2026. See what I mean? It's been a long year. It's only January. Register to vote if you have not. Check your registration if you have. Make sure your party affiliation is correct. Action item number 2, find your current representatives. You can go to congress.gov to find this information. Action number 3, find out the primary date. Find out the challenger that meets your goals. Now, when we move on to spring, identify which key races you want to have an impact and try to connect with other people doing this work. If you can't find other people trying to do this work, be that person. Like I said, most people are clamoring for leadership right now. Be the leader. We talked about something in the first season of Ignite called the first follower. So then it becomes primary season. Obviously, the first action step there is voting, but bring someone else with you. Offer rides, text your friends, go on social media. If you can get 3 people to vote, you're having a 300% magnifier on your vote. If you get 3 people to do the same, you just magnified your vote by 900%. That's massive. You just stole an election. You turned your 1 vote into 9 votes. And I suspect you can do much more. Obviously, the title of this in the last episode was How to Steal an Election. And I picked that title very deliberately because what we're talking about isn't stealing in an illegitimate sense. We're talking about taking power back from the people who stole it from us. Our representation, our power. The primary system is broken because it was designed to be broken. It was designed to favor insiders, connected, to discourage participation, to reward the status quo. So let's give them something they can't challenge and something they can't handle. Let's take their system and break it. Find out when your primary is. Make a voter guide. Share it. Steal your election. The establishment is counting on you to stay home, confused, and exhausted. Prove them wrong. This has been episode 2 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. People always ask me, what can I do to fight fascism? Well, as I promised, these are the steps. Now you have a choice. You can take the comfortable path. You can doom scroll, go to work. You can pretend like you didn't even listen to the last 40 minutes of this episode. Or you can get to work, get your hands dirty, and you can go steal an election. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of season 2 of Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise.